Hey, everybody. Welcome to Astonishing Junk Drawer number 20. And no, I didn't have to go quickly look up which one it was while the theme was playing, which is exactly what I did. It is number 20. It's been a little bit of a delay since the last one, which I put squarely on myself just for some personal stuff, which I posted about on Patreon. And honestly was literally moved to tears when I read how quickly people came in and said all kinds of wonderful things just inside of like 10 minutes. I went to walk the dog. I posted, hey, sorry, we hadn't done a junk drawer, some stuff going on. Walked the dog, came back, and there was like 30 comments from very supportive, kind people. So I would like to thank you all very much for that.
It was very lovely. Just Scott, don't go to Reddit. That's what
they would just be like,
it's fine. No, thank you very much. It shows how much support we get, and that's what keeps us going. Is friends that like to hear about this kind of stuff, and that's exactly what we're going to have on today. A friend of ours, a new friend of ours, that has some pretty wild stories. That part of which she experienced, and part of it's from people that she knew very well at the time. So can't wait to get to that. But Scott, do we have any news for since we've been away so long?
Well, I mean, I think, no, I don't think we do right now. The only news we have is that we're going to get back onto our business here with the junk drawers and keep those moving. I guess I will leak that. I don't want to say too much about this, but we are developing another form of content that we're having a lot of fun with in the background. And that may be a new offering that will start its life on Patreon exclusively. And then later it might be something that moves to YouTube, but we are excited about that. I don't want to say too much about it now because we're still.
No, that was too much already. No, that was just enough. I think it's to let you know that we are trying to keep it fresh around here and developing new ideas. And this is something that we've actually thought about since probably just right after we started the show, is that how could we incorporate this new fun angle? And so it's taken this long, but we think maybe the technology has caught up to where we might be able to do something with it. But we're always looking to provide something to our audience, and certainly the people that are paying to get their money, a bang for their buck, so to say.
Yeah, we need a new flavor of Doritos, so we're working on that. And
but we're coming out with Crystal Pepsi, so that's
Crystal Pepsi. Don't go back. But without further ado, we would like to welcome Amelia Cotter to the show. I'm going to ask the mechanic to bring her up. There she is. Amelia, thank you so much for joining us today. Amelia is a very talented author. She's a presenter. She's a poet. You're everything. What don't you do? Like you're a busy person.
I can even fix the toilet. So I do a lot of things. Yeah.
That is a handy lifetime skill.
Not to imply that I break a lot of toilets, but
no, it's like getting the flu. It's going to happen at some point. It's
going to happen. Somebody's going to need. It's a good life skill. But but thank you so much for having me on. I love you guys. I'm such a huge fan. I'm not going to gush, but I am going to gush. So I've been listening for 5 or 6 years. So not from the beginning, but, for a good chunk.
Yeah.
That's long enough. Yeah.
Right. Long enough. And I'll state for the record that my favorite episodes are the ones that are like 8 hours long and require being broken up into like 4 parts.
Yes, I know. We have some plans on some of those. I actually got depressed when I saw that Netflix beat us to the punch on MH370, the Malaysian flight that disappeared. I wanted to be first out of the gate on that, but I'm anxious to see it.
Here's the thing is that we always try to take a different approach. One thing I've noticed, now having been on television for a few times, is that, you're limited when you have those kinds of network shows, even within a documentary. As many parts as you can have. You can't have 14 parts. It's there are restrictions and rules.
Yeah, well, they did 9, I think. So
yeah. Here's the thing, though, is that even though all the stories that we cover, other podcasts have done them. They've been on other shows, certainly In Search Of, things like that, old staples, and what we've heard from our listeners is that we'll say that, well, here's another show that did a really good job on this. Like it's very concise, much more than us. And they're like, no, we want to hear you guys do it. And that's because I think Scott and I can bring something that you can't bring to a documentary, which is this conversational aspect. We can dive deeper on certain things that we find interesting. We don't have to trim things to fit it into this episode, because even in a 8 or 9, 12 part series, you're still limited. You have a network that's telling you that's giving you notes like, well, let's shy away from that narrative. Let's go over here because that seems to track well for a general audience. So, podcasting is it's an indulgent medium, and we get to do what we want. So don't act like we're not going to do it at some point. We just we might have to watch that and then rethink of a strategy. But one thing I want to say about Amelia before we got started is that we had a lot of terrific submissions for our Halloween shows, and we still very grateful for that. Thank you so much. And if your story didn't get chosen, it's not because it wasn't good. It's we received a large grouping of stories that Amelia's is one of those that ended up in the finalist category, but there were a grouping of stories that were that wouldn't have gotten justice if they were kept to 10, 15 minutes a segment just for the person to tell it, because these are usually lifetime stories or a lifetime of experiences or experiences that require more discussion and thought and philosophy on it. And I think that's what Amelia is going to present to us here today is that just to sum this up in 10 minutes, or it wouldn't have come off, they wouldn't have done it justice. And it certainly deserved a lot more time. So we reserved a section of stories that we would like to bring people on for these junk drawers because they have more time to be more conversational about it, to tell more of the story, and really to be more interactive with it than just like read us your email. And we're going to get to the next one in 10 minutes. So that's why it didn't end up in one of the shows. But we hope to feature more people's stories as we go along that are of that ilk, that are just, is either a long email or, this has always been happening to me with these very interesting themes and motifs that keep popping up. And Amelia, today, what is that motif for you?
Well, this is my stories that I will be sharing with you all tonight are going to revolve around what I will refer to as gnomes. This is something that I haven't gone public with before. So this is like a really public way for me to kind of come out with my experiences. I approach these things from the same perspective that you guys do. I love stories. I am a storyteller at heart, even though paranormal research and investigation is sort of part of, part of what I do and what I love and what I think about. I really have come to expand my horizons in the last couple of years, be more open to the stories and experiences of others, be more open to hearing different types of stories and the different connections between things. So it's a joke, of course, that like the paranormal community was siloed for a very long time between people who were only into ghosts, only into Bigfoot, only into UFOs. Now people are coming together, having a lot more conversations and finding a lot more intersectionality between all of those things. And so that fascinates me, and I'm trying to grow in that. And part of my growth is to talk about my own weird experiences. Yeah. I'm a person who has traditionally been skeptical until proven otherwise. Even though then when you hear like the stuff that I've gone through, you'd be like, how could you possibly be? And just something like during the time, right? During the time of COVID and listening to just the greater picture about people telling and sharing their stories and people validating each other's experiences in life, even if they aren't experiences that they have personally had, got me thinking about how we interpret that kind of in the paranormal world. And so I've made it a point to kind of take the step to start validating and believing the stories of others, even if it's something that seems crazy. Yeah. Something that hasn't happened to me, something I've never seen or even heard of or might not believe in, doesn't mean it's not real. It doesn't mean that it didn't happen in some way, shape, or form to that person. So that also serves as my disclaimer for all the crazy stuff that you're about to hear.
Well, that's something quickly, Scott, I just want to say it's something that we talk about all the time. And with people, you see this a lot, of course. Everything on the internet now is like, I think that video is fake, or this person's lying, or you do find out later that maybe they're trying to, it's like, well, I've been working on a screenplay. It's like, right. Okay. But what do you do when it's a very close friend of yours? And in this case, it's a family member and also somebody, you were very close with, that mentions these things, and you tend to believe them with everything else they say, except that this story is so outrageous. You like, okay, I want to believe that you believe it, but like, what do I believe? about you, and what do I believe about it? And that is a whole other dynamic, because it challenges us. It's like, are you still not going to believe it until it happens to you? And then what happens when it does?
Yeah. And we also find, like, we're always trying to find meaning and value in these stories too, connections. And I think stepping back from things now, I can make some connections, but also, like, sometimes things just don't make sense. They just don't tie up neatly with a bow, and maybe they shouldn't or aren't meant to. And it's for us to wonder. That's the beautiful part of all of this, is wondering. But yeah, I'll save more of those thoughts, I guess, for later, because it's,
well, let's talk a little bit about your background. I mean, because you're a published poet, an author. And also you were talking to us as we were getting to know each other before we started recording. You've appeared at a lot of conventions and places with folks I'm sure that we know. So you're out there in the mix on all this stuff as well, right?
Yeah, so I do a lot of talks on haunted history, people's relationships with hauntings, people's true paranormal encounters. I've done a couple of television shows myself, so I also sometimes just talk about, like, the nature of what it's like to either be on TV in the paranormal world, because people always have a lot of thoughts and questions about that, as well as I've done some consulting with paranormal television as well. So kind of like to what Forrest was talking about with, like, prescribed agendas or objectives and things like that in television, and how that shapes stories and how that shapes the stories that we hear and that we watch on TV, and explaining to people the difference between entertainment and reality. And often those conversations happen with other, like, ghost hunters and stuff too, who have lots of big, important opinions about how this kind of thing is portrayed on TV. But yeah, I love it. So I've written 5 books. That's what I am at heart, is a writer. So I write about other things that aren't paranormal. Like, I'm also a poet, and I do poetry about trauma and healing and things like that. People working through mental illness or difficult times in their life. I have a day job as well that is unrelated to both of those things. So yeah. I came to
by day. Are you like a repo person? You repossess cars or something?
That would be
Bounty
awesome.
hunter.
No.
Oh, okay.
That would be super cool. No, I'm the manager of docent programs at the Lincoln Park Conservancy here in Chicago. So I work with the docents. If anybody has ever been to the Lincoln Park Conservatory by the zoo there.
Oh, that's cool.
And the natural areas around Lincoln Park. So I get people hyped. About sharing their joys with other people. I'm not a scientist or a sciencey person, but I'm responsible for getting people excited about the natural world. And the supernatural world.
That's great. That's a pretty great mix.
Yeah.
You've got a lot of perspectives there that I feel like they're all, as you just said, what's the word I was going to say where things were overlapping? You picked a better word. I think interrelated or whatever. But
Venn diagram. That's one.
The Venn diagram. Yeah.
Overlapping circles of influence.
But that gives you a better perspective, is that you're looking at everything from all ends of the spectrum and trying to figure out what part of the Venn diagram things belong in and what it means for them to be in those parts and to overlap. It sounds fascinating.
Thank you.
Like, how did you wind up here? Because you've got a very unusual, milieu of things going on, it seems like, but you're managing. How did paranormal get in the mix, for one thing?
So I've loved ghost stories and ghostly stuff since I was a kid. When I was younger, I knew from a young age that I wanted to be a writer, and I wanted to write about ghosts from that sort of like romantic, like candlelight sort of Edgar Allan Poe kind of perspective and vibe. I initially, after I moved to Chicago in 2008, yes, I was diagnosed with cancer in 2007, right after literally like 2 months or a month after I graduated from college. So that put a wrench in my plans. I moved home with my parents. I went into treatment. Obviously, I turned out okay. I had stage 4 Hodgkin lymphoma.
Oh my gosh.
Which was like a psychedelic experience. And so I moved to Chicago 2 weeks after my chemotherapy ended. I was ready to leave the nest and fly free. I moved here with a friend, and I guess I had it in me at that time that I wanted to start working on my dreams sooner than later. I was like, I really want to be a writer. And this story that I had connected with from my childhood, which was a ghost story, was what I wanted to start with. But when I wrote the book, I envisioned it as a young adult romance type of book, that there were elements of reality in it, but that it was going to be middle grade fiction type of thing. I ended up self-publishing it under the name This House, The True Story of a Girl and a Ghost. I didn't know what I was doing. I was like 24. I was like, there's a lot of key words in this, right?
Right.
So like, here's my 800 word title. But at the time, whatever I did, it caught on, and I started to see it caught on. And I had joined a ghost hunting group when I moved to Chicago. And I was like, well, who am I going to sell the book to besides my mom and dad? Like, I'll sell it to these folks. And then I just started to notice that like Dave Schrader contacted me to be on Darkness Radio. And I was like, Amelia, I think you're onto something. And so then I became very much involved with the paranormal community, and I took a lot of heat because the book was the true story of a girl and a ghost, but there was a lot of narrative elements in it. And I was like, you guys, this is not where I thought this was going to go. But I started to make friends with people, and Chicago has had and still has, and now there's a new generation of like just a really rich folklore, ghost hunting, paranormal community, whatever you want to call it, all of the above. And so I guess I got in touch with the right people. I was friends with Ursula Bielski, who was one of my mentors, and worked with Chicago Hauntings Ghost Tours for a long time. So anyway, I kind of like came right into it. And this has by far probably been a much richer and more rewarding experience than if I had just stuck with writing children's books or something and sort of like faded away. I feel like I'm growing this is a career moment for me, like being on this show. So I'm still growing and climbing. But
wow.
We came across Ursula in our Resurrection Mary series.
Yep.
And she was also Scott. Who is the name of the gentleman who used to have a show on WGN Radio?
The DJ. And he did ghost tours.
Not
Richard,
Ray. Richard Crow. Richard Crow.
Yes. Yeah.
And so she's a fixture. Certainly, we certainly know her name. And
he had an amazing voice.
But you're right. There's a community there, as there are in most places, and even the smallest towns. Usually, if there's some like-minded folks, they will eventually find each other, and there's room for all manner, as we're seeing now, of types of media within the genre. And it's like historical fiction. There's room for that. There's room for narrative elements because it's a story. That's what we're doing here. Is that you're telling a story about an experience. And you can get two people having the same experience, which is also interesting. And a great example of that is the Uncanny podcast that some friends of ours in the UK have introduced us to. And we're two guys in college. Bloody hell, Ken. It was like Ken was the one guy who while at uni experienced something, and then his roommate had pretty much the same exact experience, but theirs differed so much. And that is part of the phenomenon, is that a lot of it is POV. And so there is room for personal narrative and point of view on this. Absolutely. Because there's not just one truth. And if you don't tell that, then you need to hit the road. There's room for all of it, as long as you're clear about it. And like I said, I think as long as people are open about what they're presenting and how, and not trying to pull one over on folks. I don't really have a problem with it, but
I agree.
But where did you? So I guess let's get to the beginning of your story, because, like I said, that was such an intriguing email that it's one of those lifetime kind of things. It involves family and significant others. I think it started in childhood, or when did you first started noticing that maybe things were different with me and my family?
Oh boy. So, okay. So let me start. So my follow-up to this house was Maryland Ghosts. I wanted to write, I'm from Maryland originally. I wanted to write a book that was like an homage to my home state, that was people's true paranormal encounters. And I would say a good a good portion of the stories in the book are like family stories, family and friends and people who were sort of like, I wanted to record these things, for myself and like for posterity or whatever, because my family has the most interesting stories. My aunt and uncle both have had UFO encounters, very different from each other. My parents themselves are not big believers in the paranormal, but they're certainly interested in the topic. And when the topic comes up, their attention is piqued. Mm-hmm. I had my fascination with it since I was a kid. It was just something that was in me. And I know that things like run in families, experiences tend to run in families as well. But it was always a part of me growing up too. I grew up in Bel Air, Maryland. And if you're not doing drugs and partying when you're a teenager, which I wasn't cool enough to do, you were with your other nerdy friends, like exploring cemeteries and whatever, going to all these like rite of passage sites and haunted abandoned places. So I did all that when I was young as well. And my parents thought that was really cool. Like they thought that was neat. They were like, yeah, do it. Go for it. That sounds exciting. You won't get pregnant doing that. So
better than doing all kinds of substances out of their sight. But it's a macabre hobby. But I think we all started off with some kind of interest in that, or something that piques our interest later on in life, or just a general interest. And sometimes it's an experience. But for you, it was so there's a. I guess your friends and family, since they're open to it, it was encouraged a bit. So that's where your interest started?
Yeah. So when I was like 11, my dad worked at the Manor Tavern, which is a restaurant in Moncton, Maryland, that was built on the property of the old Third Lord Baltimore, Charles Calvert. I think that's his name. There's like a Charles County and a Calvert County in Maryland, in like the late 1700s. So this restaurant had been a stable like 250 years ago, and then became other things over the years, turned into a restaurant. And across the parking lot, literally, if you sat on the patio eating your $30 steak, you could see this abandoned house, this creepy abandoned house that the locals referred to as Walter's house. And because we had one car, my mom and I would drive out to drop him off at work and then pick him up when he was done. That house was my house. I loved that house. I would go in the house. I would explore. I was like this little junior ghost hunter. They had the coolest little books for kids at the library at that time. Like it was all in the occult section, and they had like these little ghost hunting guides and whatever. And I just, I went out with my recorder and my camera and took pictures and just really imagined myself seeing this ghost. And then one day I did. So for me, my big moment in life happened when I was 11, and that was seeing this full body apparition. It was not scary. It was exhilarating. It opened the world to me. It opened my eyes to what a beautiful, strange, exciting place the world is, and how I'll use the word crazy like 1,000 times, but just, that there's so much more to life than like being a kid in Bel Air, Maryland. And anyway, so it was a beautiful experience, and that kind of set me on the pathway of, it's hard to say because now it all makes sense because here I am, but at the same time, like I still lived my life doing all of the other things, but I just had this connection with the spirit world or with ghosts. I didn't feel psychic. I didn't feel like they were all around me all the time or that I could communicate with them, but just that they were there. I'm here, they're there, we're cool,
What what did what did it look like?
So one of the craziest things about it, and this relates, I was just thinking about it this past week when I was thinking about just this, he was leaning out of a window. He was like a young boy or young man, not that much older than me. And he was leaning out of a window and he was completely white, or like shades of white and gray. But I could see that he was wearing like suspenders and like an old fashioned, like not a puffy shirt, but you know what I mean? Like a work shirt with like the, gathered at the cuff. And he had curly hair and his face was completely white. He had no face. It was like a doll that doesn't have a face. So it wasn't like a vacuum, like a vacuum of terror. Right. It was like there was no face. But I could read his expression. Like when I looked up into the window of the attic and I could see him looking down at me. And my mom was there and my friend Graham from school was there. And he and I both saw it, but my mom didn't. She was driving. So we were in a car pulling away from the house so that she could tell that we were seeing something. She was driving very slowly because we were pulling away. And as we were pulling away, his head just turned and watched us go. And my mom offered to back up the car. And I said no. In my little kid wisdom, I was like, if we go back and he's not there, my heart will be broken. If we go back and he is there, then I think I will be scared. But I remember when his head turned, I just felt this ball in my stomach, sort of like forming. It's like that static. A lot of people report a static electricity feeling all over. Yeah. And I could just tell that he was surprised that we could see him.
Where is this house again?
So the house is gone now. You can visit this site. It's in Moncton, Maryland, the Manor Tavern Restaurant.
Right.
And where the house used to stand, there's now an equestrian hospital.
Okay.
Equestrian, I think. So this is out in like horse country in like Baltimore County. So you'll see people riding their horses, maybe equine. I don't know what word I'm looking for, but there was another house next to it.
Does that look familiar to you?
That's interesting.
That's across from the
on Old York Road.
Yeah,
it's right off of Old York Road, and I think like Hess Road.
Yeah,
rings a bell.
Okay, the mechanic is looking for images, so in the background.
I appreciate that. But yeah, so it there was a house next to Walter's house that was occupied at the time by somebody else who worked at the restaurant. So she had stories. About like her son's fire trucks moving around by themselves at night and going off and stuff like that.
Spielbergy.
And Jonathan and I, my husband and I, visited the site in 2020, right before lockdown happened, and that house is now abandoned. That house is now abandoned, and it looks the way Walter's house used to look. And it really, like, I'm not that old, so it was really like, it was interesting. But yeah. So.
I would love to have seen an apparition. I have not.
I've had other experiences.
It's still early, Scott.
But nothing like that. So I feel like I was open to it because I was a kid and because I was at that right age and because I invited the experience. So thank goodness it wasn't something like something more sinister or whatever. But I've had, obviously we're going to talk about the other experiences I've had, but nothing ever has come close to that. And now I think even if something like these gnome things were happening to me now, I don't think I would handle it the way I did 10 years ago. I'm not up for it. I have a different level of anxiety now. I love paranormal stuff. I will go to a haunted place. I do not want the hauntings to come to me. I don't, I need to sleep. I have to get up early for work. I can't.
Yeah.
It's different.
Yeah. I'm completely get that point of view.
Well, you, like I said, I've always said this. It's that yeah, you're looking for that experience. Certainly the best thing would be to record something just to, again, because we're doing a show, we would love to share something like that on our own. But on the other hand, I don't need a shadow person showing up because I have to get up in the morning. I don't need to be up all night. On the other hand, a lot of people report be like, I went right to sleep. Maybe it's a great sleep aid. It's like, it's that, that paranormal apathy angle where it's just like, this most terrifying Gorn thing showed up in my bedroom. And then I just went to sleep right after that. But it was awful, so it's all over the map. We may be scaring ourselves more than the actual experience, where it's just, like you said, it's a different point of view with the anxiety and how you handle it. And as a kid, maybe that's why Walter, as you call him, or got the sense that was his name.
Yeah.
It's two kids identifying with each other. And as we all know, and you forget as you get older, turn into an adult, that you lose that. There is a club with kids. They can't do everything an adult can. They're limited, but it's their own special world for a while. And we all lose that. But within that, it's like just, when you're very little, it's being able to play with any kid. There's no prejudice. There's no, all those social factors that you learn in high school. They're not there yet. And so it's like being in a club. And it's interesting how you put it, that he looked surprised that you noticed him. And because I'm sure he's gone through, since he passed away, all these people coming around the house and no one seems to be able to see him. And how lonely that must feel. And then here's somebody who seems to sense that he's there. And so there's also that connection.
And there have been other times in my life, and I will say, I don't know if I mentioned that, they called it Walter's house affectionately, and they named all the ghosts Walter that were on kind of just affectionately on the property.
Okay.
It happened after somebody who did an early morning shift in the restaurant was vacuuming. A lady in a Victorian dress walked into the room, asked him if he had seen Walter. He said, "No, ma'am." And then she walked through a wall. And after that story, they were like, we're just calling all the ghosts Walter, just sort of as a joke. But, when I was sick, I had a lot of like vivid dreams. Also because of just the sickness, I had vivid dreams. But one of those was like a visualization of my friend's grandparents, who I'd never met, which was interesting. They had passed away around the time within a year or two of this. I visualized my friend Gretchen's grandparents and my grandmother and Walter. Walter, as I saw him, just sort of like this white, like mannequin-like figure in this dream, sort of in a halo of light. And they were kind of there. They were like my cheerleading squad. So he was like still there. And there are times if I talk about him, or I'll get chills, but like I'll smell that smell of like damp, rotten wood that you smell when you're in an abandoned house.
Okay. All right. So earlier when you were like, I'm not psychic, you made a long list of all the things you aren't.
Well,
and then
that's been something I've been exploring more in the last couple of years. I closed myself off to it. Weird things happen to me anyway, and then now I'm opening up again to it, where I still don't communicate with them, or not in the way that you hear about a lot of people communicating. But I wonder and think about whether or not I just, I try to have this aura with living people, that I'm accessible, that I'm somebody you can trust, I'm approachable. This is me and you're you, and you can be you with me, or, something like that. And if that, presents me to them in a way where they feel comfortable showing themselves or demonstrating themselves to me in some way, it doesn't really go any further than that. But that could be what they're looking for, is just that acknowledgement, or a connection.
Well, two things before we get into discussion of the we folk. That one thing that did strike me is your mention of your severe illness, because that is also something we see somewhat common with people that have these really intense experiences during their lives. And often it happens around an illness, especially when they're younger, when they're confined, and you can speculate on the cause for that. Maybe being, with that illness opens up some barriers and some doors that were normally shut before when you're fine and healthy and everything's going along swimmingly. But being sick for quite a while, I remember our friend Johnny L. Tenney had a childhood sickness. I think I remember his story, which is pretty incredible, that he was gone for a year from school. And of course, he's about our age. And so back then they just saw, like, I guess he died. We haven't seen him. And he showed up at school again. They're like, oh, what happened? He's like, well, I was bedridden, or confined to my bedroom for about a year. And so when you have these illnesses, they bring down some walls and you're open to more of these types of experiences. Do you think there's anything to that?
I wonder about that because there's not really a history of Hodgkin lymphoma or lymphoma at all in my family. And the doctors weren't really able to give me any information about where it, not where it came from. Like, they're not magicians either, but they were like, you could have had this when you were young and it just started to grow really, really fast. Or it could have just started to grow really, really fast in the past year. Cause I spent about a year having horrific chest pains. Hodgkin's grows it's a fast growing cancer. So that's one of the reasons why it can be easier to treat in people who are healthy, because it breaks down faster as well, I guess. But I wonder about that. Like, how long was I sick and never had any symptoms and didn't know? Or was I always a little bit frail? I don't know.
Yeah.
I was a very sensitive kid. So, I would be open to the possibility of that for sure.
Well, as you go through your studies, and certainly you're a lifelong, I think, researcher and a person of interest as we are, take notice of those stories. Another one I think was Orfeo Angelucci, who had a very significant life experience with outer space beings as he saw them, but he was also had a childhood illness. And so it's just not that it not certainly probably a majority, but a lot of people, it seems that's not an uncommon factor. But the other thing I was going to mention here before we get started is you could see my woodland friends here, and I just want to give a shout out because I quickly you would not like to see me pull the curtain behind the Emerald was it the Wizard of Oz here, and that it's kind of deflates the mood and the feeling here. But I just want to give a shout out to Amanda Hughes. This is her photograph, and her label or brand is Adorable Activism, and this is I think this comes from the Ferguson Valley in Western Australia. So anyway, but you could see that these types of gnomes everybody knows about, and they're very generally sought or seen as very friendly, maybe a little mischievous. You want to treat them right. They'll take care of you and your garden. And so, and maybe ward off the things that are much worse. But what is your first experience with something, I'm not going to say it's gnomes, but it's something small and mysterious coming into your life?
Oh boy. So, yeah, so let's get into it. Whew, now I need my 1,100 pages of notes that I took about.
All right, consult your notes if you want to.
Yeah,
we're just having a friendly conversation here. That's what we always say.
It's just hard to know where to start because I want to say oh man, when I was a kid, I loved gnomes, but I don't know if I did. We were talking a little bit about some influential TV shows and stuff. Like David the Gnome was a show that I watched when I was a kid. My mom had a book about gnomes.
Just quickly. I'd never come across that. And I was surprised I didn't. It's like everybody else. When you're a kid, you only watch the TV that's syndicated in your local area here. And that never came on. But it's I just want to make a note of that before we forget.
I hadn't heard of it either. I'm looking now on Wikipedia.
David the Gnome. And it's like, this is no schlock production. It was voiced by America's Dad, Tom. Let's see here. Hold on.
Oh, it's Tom Bosley. What?
Tom Bosley, from Happy Days, and narrated by Christopher Plummer. And when Amelia mentioned that to me as an influence or something that kind of informs how you think about these things, especially as a kid. There were two things. I watched a little bit of the one episode. It's quite well done. It's very kind of vintage
yes. Now I
animation.
recognize him.
And now he recognizes it. But
now I'm looking at the images. I do recognize it. Yeah.
Before we get started talking about this, there were two things that kind of struck me. And the first, and then we'll let, sorry for interrupting you, Amelia, but we'll get back to the idea of it. And that is, you might think it's a silly children's animated series, but there are two things that struck me. One is Christopher Plummer's the narrator saying, what, you've never seen a gnome? Well, they're all around us. Just take a closer look. And that is the thing, is that we don't notice because we're not looking and we're not paying attention. And sometimes that we're forced to. And then sometimes it's just that I don't want to see this. I'm not going to see it. And you don't. The other thing is that where they are, and I thought it was kind of nicely poetically philosophical in that he says something like, they leave just before we arrive and are there just after we've left. So it's like, why don't I see them? Because there is some rule or something where they're just like, they're there when you're not. And then when you are there, they disappear. And it's like the Michigan J Frog. It sings when you're alone. When you can bring it to other people, it shuts up, and then you look like a nutcase. But anyway, getting back to that, it's like there was something that was when you were a kid, you saw that, and do you think that is going to inform anything? That childhood notion of what this little thing is supposed to be?
So I don't know, because what I saw did not look like David the Gnome, but what my uncle saw almost exactly looked like David the Gnome. And I don't think my uncle knew about David the Gnome either. And my grandparents always had the little lawn gnomes, and I was always weirded out by them. My mom had a book called Gnomes, which I did find on Wikipedia. It's like this really like a biology book about gnomes that was written for children. That's like, it was very, if you can get your hands on a copy of it, it's really wild. And so I was just sort of like low key interested in the topic. And then when I was collecting stories around 2011 for Maryland Ghosts, my uncle Bernie sent me just a stack of handwritten stories. He was like, oh, where should I begin? He was like, I'll send you all of them. He's like, a lot of them happened in Pennsylvania. Some of them happened when he was stationed in Vietnam. Some of them are from Maryland. I'll send you everything I have, and you'd use whatever you can use. A lot of them were ghost stories from throughout his life. And then tucked ever so neatly and unassumingly into the pile were these two stories about him seeing these gnomes. I did some preliminary research, and I was like, okay, like, gnomes in folklore, like elementals, sprites, elves, duendes. Aloosh is a word I've heard before, but only knew how to spell it since as of this week, and realized that's what that is. But like a lot of,
I learned how to spell it an hour ago. So.
Right, folklore from around the world. Most cultures, independent of each other, have some type of elemental being. Fairies, of course, fairies as well. Like. Have some type of being. And a lot of them, what's interesting is like not all, like demons in various types of folklore don't necessarily behave the same or have the same sort of relationship, within the context of a religion or a folklore mythology. But like a lot of times these little wee folk, the small people and whatever they are, the puckwudgies, I mean, we've heard all these names, tend to have the same kind of behavior, that sort of trickstery, like, coming and going, can be good or bad type of like vibe to them, and not good or bad. I don't actually really believe in that spectrum of good and bad. That's sort of like a fundamental, like iconic battle of good and evil and all that. I think there's just like a spectrum of being that these things are on. So anyway, I learned a lot about gnomes when I read this story, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this is insane. Like I love my uncle, and I believe him, and I believe his stories, but I was like, this is just so out of left field. So I will share his descriptions. I'll read those descriptions to you before, as we wind up with this, because there's so much better than how I could tell them. So I decided to include them in the book. One of them takes place near Frederick, Maryland, which is where I went to school at Hood College in Frederick, Maryland, which is by Fort Detrick. It's between, it's near Camp David, relatively geographically. It's between Baltimore and DC. Maryland is rich in folklore, and UFO stories and creature stories and things released from proving grounds and stuff like that. So anyway, the other one takes place, I think, somewhere in Pennsylvania, but I had to include that too, because how often do you have the opportunity to hear these gnome stories? So, all right, this is his story from the second edition of Maryland Ghosts. Paranormal Encounters in the Free State.
All having some problems there, Ed.
Hold your book up again. Yeah, hold the book up again. We'll Scott. We can have links to
in the background. He's trying to do now.
I just do my.
Why is it me, Ed? I'm not holding the book. Come on, man. The mechanic
our
is
technical director.
Yeah,
Ed.
It's the Gnomes.
We can wait.
Hold on a second.
It's like he can't make her full frame. Wait, I bet I can do it. I'm going to do it.
Yeah, he may not have control of this section. There you go.
Oh, there you go. There's the book.
Yeah.
There you go.
Maybe I have to talk to be front and center. Okay, so yeah.
Okay, and Scott, we'll have with our posting, we will have links to anything that she's talking about, right? Okay.
Yes. All right. So here he goes with his story. I was traveling west on Route 70, heading for Altoona, Pennsylvania, to visit my wife, Deborah, sometime in the fall of 1996. It should be also stated that he has like a photographic memory. Like he tells the same stories over and over again with the exact same details. He remembers dates, names, faces, unlike anybody I've ever known. So when it sounds like some of these details are too on the nose, this is who he is as a person. This is across the board.
Oh, that's important because Scott, that's the first thing he picks out is that this is too on the nose.
When you're like, how did you, like my second grade teacher on June 17th, 1962 or something. You're like, what?
Wow.
So there are railroad tracks all around Hagerstown, which earned its nickname, the Hub, from the old coal and lumber days of the late 1800s and early 1900s. As I approached the part of Route 70 West where railroad tracks pass under the highway, I noticed something down in the knoll by the tracks. I slowed down. There was no traffic behind me. There, sitting on the knoll, was a man of childlike proportions. His head and nose were large, his body small, sitting hunched over, resting his forearms and elbows on his knees. I'm not laughing because it's funny. I'm laughing because it gives me like chills. He was dressed in childlike clothing with long-toed slippers, tights, a long shirt with a waist belt or rope, and he had a dark blue hat that reminded me of Peter Pan's hat. I could not believe my own eyes and wished I had a camera. His eyes seemed large and brown, yet a bit sunken due to his high cheekbones. His hands seemed unusually long for his size, fingers folded, yet he had large knuckles. I noticed him noticing me as he glanced to his left. Remember, my vehicle was moving very slowly at this point. I tried not to make eye contact with him. I didn't want to disturb him and, of course, didn't want to wreck my vehicle. But then it happened. Our eyes made contact, and he, the gnome, was gone in a flash, completely vanished. I could not resist. I had to stop and investigate. Upon my arrival at the knoll, I went to the exact spot he had been. I noticed patches of grass were matted down and a few acorn shells were lying about. I shared my sighting with Deborah when I arrived in Altoona, but as you can imagine, I don't think she believed me. So this other one happened the same year, it seems. 10 years later. So this was in 1996. His next and presumably final encounter was in 2006. Where am I? Okay. My next experience with such a being happened in 2006 near Sankertown outside of Altoona, Pennsylvania. I was hunting deer on the McNeil farm on Crescent Mountain with a friend. The morning was very cold and we had a light dusting of snow. We had seen some very nice bucks during preseason scouting using this trail a lot. Around 8 a.m., I could hear something moving down the trail in the woods behind us. I was prepared to see a deer travel in range, but I was quite surprised. What appeared was a gnome, and he's using quotations, similar in all traits to the gnome I described in the other story. I never took my rifle off safe. I couldn't imagine shooting it. The little person got to within 15 yards of me, and he either saw me or smelled me. I don't know which. In a flash, he ran faster than any human or any animal I have ever seen. He actually became a blur as he kept on the trail. I looked over at my friend, who was staring at me. Did you hear that? Mike asked in a low voice. Did you see anything? Yes, I replied. Not only did I hear it, but I also saw it, and you are not going to believe me when I tell you what it was. Mike had heard the approaching noise and had seen my body language as I had prepared for what may have been a nice buck. He heard the sounds getting louder and faster, yet he never saw the gnome.
Wow.
Was there some element, I think you told me that, was it Mike that saw, he didn't see the creature, but he saw like leaves kick up.
Yeah. Like he's this sort of this.
Like a cartoon. It's like,
Yeah. And was just completely puzzled by it. It was like this is the sudden gust of wind to him, right. Whereas my Uncle Bernie was seeing this person sort of like having a jaunt along the pathway.
Is Uncle Bernie, is he a blood relative of yours?
Yes. So yes, he's my mom's oldest brother.
Okay.
Of 5 children.
Okay.
And he was in Vietnam in 1977 to 78, I believe. Okay. And his health, so he had paranormal experiences prior to that. He had paranormal experiences during that. And then his paranormal experiences escalated after that. He refers to himself as a haunted person. And he had like a full immune system breakdown in like the early 90s from the Agent Orange. And that's when things got really psychedelic for him. And I think it's easy. People have said to me before, well, like, you know, again, that whole like, oh, okay, well, that would be a reason why it's not real. He's seeing things, he's hallucinating. And I think that's a real shame. I think that's a shame to believe that that would be true. If anything, I would believe that those would enhance his experiences, and like to what you were saying earlier about like the sickness, you know, opening your mind to things. But yeah, so he's the kind of person who might see spirits or, you know, and feel spirits everywhere he goes. But he had some UFO encounters when he was a kid, as did my aunt. But this was unprecedented, just this random sort of these 2 gnome stories.
Well, as we talked about before, I think we maybe started getting a recording, or maybe it's in it, that the phenomenon is now enveloping all disciplines and genres of people. As you said before, it's like, well, yeah, we're Bigfoot people, these gnomes, that's silly. Like we're into the giant human-like apes. Right. But it's just, there are so many stories now, again, because people are opening up and able to talk about them or feeling like they can, is that you're hearing all these different stories, and they may not all be true. People might be misremembering or conflating things or filling in the blanks when they're, or just outright fibbing. Of course, that's a possibility, but you're hearing all these different strange things that, you know, I mean, they're on the nose, but they're just so out there, as you say. And people are like, that's what happened. And then you start to see all these elements like, well, there was a UFO, but then I did see a little gnome-like guy right after this thing went over the hill, you know, like this giant cigar. And then, or there's a Bigfoot, or like all these other weird things are happening within this. And it's
not just like that one dude that, you know, that has that weird story. All of a sudden, it's like a lot of people have had these experiences. Yeah. A lot of people have seen these things. And it's just, people don't bring it up. I didn't talk about like what happened to me. I didn't talk about it at paranormal conventions because I was like, they're going to make fun of me or think that I'm, you know, a nutcase. Right. I had told the story once to a group of people, and they laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed like a laugh track. And I thought, I don't know if I want to go this route again, because this was a big deal. So this leaked into my life in a way that I didn't expect, where, I was working on the book, really spooking myself when I was typing up these stories and then typing up all the research and stuff that I had done. And I had come home one day to my apartment. I lived alone with my dog, Oskar, who is now 16 years old. which
I
in
heard
itself
him
is
tippy
paranormal.
tapping.
We can hear the
walking
nails.
around.
Hear him, that little clickety clack.
Yeah, my dog sounds the same way. Yeah.
Yeah. And I came home one day from work to the stack of papers that my uncle had sent me. My uncle Bernie had sent me was sitting under some other books on top of my desk, which is way too tall for Oskar because he's a little rat terrier Basenji mix. And he was just, chilling on the bed, and these papers that had these stories were flung everywhere all over the apartment. As if somebody had come in and just threw them into the air, make it rain. And I was really weirded out by it. I thought, and the books that they were under were still stacked neatly as they had been. So unless Oskar was learning like magic tricks, I don't know how he could have pulled them down off of the desk, out from under the books without moving them. And there were a couple, I don't think I included this in my email because I'm not exactly sure what the detail is, but he had gotten into them. Like he had chewed the stories up a little bit. He chewed a little hole in the center of the gnome stories. And I was like, this is just really uncanny. And I put them back. I chalked it up to his dog, that it was him at the time. And then I was like, that's strange. Sometimes I think when people have those strange encounters where they're just like, well, I guess I'll go to sleep, or I guess I'll pour a glass of wine, right? I think like weird stuff happens. Your brain doesn't know what to do. So you just don't do anything.
Right.
So I just went about my life and thought, well, heck, I'm writing a book about ghosts. I've got a little bit of paranormal activity here.
There's only, that's the other thing though, with, we talk about paranormal apathy, which I think Forrest already mentioned, but that idea of just kind of going to sleep or whatever. But the flip side of that is, what else can you do? Like, what are you going to do? Who, you can't, it's not like you can call Dan Aykroyd to come over with a trap. It's like there's a limited amount of investigating and inquiring. You can't even have a conversation. I mean, you can start and you break out all kinds of paranormal gear and Frank's boxes and try to do that stuff, which takes time and everything else. But generally, something that unexplainable happens in your presence. What course of action can you take?
Right. I agree. Sorry.
No, it's okay. I don't have another thought really. I'm just now like, what are you going to do?
Right.
Unless you're going to break out a bunch of gear,
I've called my mom before when I was really spooked about something, but then again, that's just sort of like, people aren't always available. People aren't always going to believe you. You don't believe what you've seen. You're not sure what happened. What do you do, right? Just go about your day.
Yeah. I would just suggest, if anybody does have something like that, just write it down immediately. Because
the details will fly out of your head a lot of times.
The details do. And you can tell us about this or how you feel about it, is that I think that maybe later on, well, I know people on the other end of this, is that you may want to relive or have those details again. And then I was going to say, I know other people who are just like, I don't ever want to think about that again.
Right.
And they don't want any details. They want to forget it as soon as possible, depending on the type of experience they had. But then I do know other people that were like, I should have made some notes. It's been so long ago. I mean, it was so kind of traumatic. Like, you forget different details. That's why Uncle Bernie's, I love that account and the description and his trait of having a photographic memory, because it's also part of the experience. Because I can picture him, the guy's, he's probably eating some acorns, and he's just got his his elbows on his knees, and just with a little waistcoat and the belt. It's almost too much. But he's Uncle Bernie is not making up stories. I mean, he's presenting this as this really happened, as all of these stories that he's given you. Right? These are things that he's claiming that are totally true.
Yeah. And they're all, for him, they're all very personal and profound. Yeah. A lot of them contain different details of his childhood or a connection that he had with his parents, my grandparents, or just other elements of things that brought in this really idyllic sort of like, this is his worldview of how, life was. This happened to me in the 1950s. And then my mom chain smoked. My mom saw the cigar-shaped UFO, and then she chain smoked for the rest of the afternoon, got up, made a full meal, and he'll describe the meal and the watermelon they ate. And then, and then we told stories, and it was a chilly day and the sunset was beautiful. And then he paints you this whole picture, and you're like, this is actually this is an incredible memory. It's not just the paranormal experience kind of. So I appreciated having that from like a family story perspective as well.
What is he still with us?
Yeah.
Wonderful. I got worried when you mentioned Agent Orange, and what happened in Vietnam that was paranormal for him?
So I should have prepped that ahead of time too. But I have those stories, if anybody's interested too, I can share them out with people.
Okay.
And before I forget, I wanted to say too, with some of the details that he shared in the Gnome story about places and, roads, I'm just curious if people out there who see this or whatever, have anything to add to it. I'd really be curious.
Yeah. Forrest, he makes fun of me. I always get onto Google Earth and start looking all around wherever stuff is taking place.
We have plenty of listeners. In fact, our own Tess is from the Delaware, D.C. area. And, I think, cool. I'll bet there are people out there. We usually get an email. It's like, I know exactly the road they're talking about.
Like, I go hunting in Sankertown, Pennsylvania too. And I saw something where, I'd be really curious, but, I have no idea what the question was anymore. You asked.
I was asking what Ernie paranormal experiences he had in Vietnam.
Oh yeah. Some of them were a little more. Some of them were more symbolic, like him finding a medal in a well that stayed with him for years until he lost it. In a certain way. But there were other ones where he was with his. Platoon, I guess, and there were more people with them on this night of fighting than were actually in the platoon, and he felt that it was the spirits of some of their other fallen comrades, and some things that he had like some interesting sixth sense experiences where he knew that something was going to happen at a certain time. So he told his lieutenant about it, and the lieutenants in his stories sound exactly like they do in the movies, where they're really rough and tough, rough and tumble, gritty, sort of like, Messino, I think you're crazy, but you know what? We're going to listen to you. So we're not going to go to this one part of the forest. We're going to stay away from that. And then lo and behold, there was an ambush in waiting, or, things like that. So really neat stories. And then, he had a very profound sixth sense about surviving there in those situations in the war, but then also outside of that.
If you're going to have any kind of gift and that's where you are, that's the one to have for sure in that circumstance. So, what about the story about you that starts off with you folding the laundry?
Yes. So this leads us to the big thing, the big part, the big happening. So all of this is going on, and I'm just continuing to live my merry little life. And working on the book, writing. And one day I was folding laundry. I lived in a little tiny studio apartment, but I had this nice walk-in closet that was across from the bathroom, small bathroom. From the vantage point of me standing in the closet, looking into the bathroom, I could see part of the bathroom floor and the bathroom rug, the radiator, old radiator in the old Chicago bathrooms, and part of the shower curtain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I was just putting laundry away. Was just dying. This story is dying for like an underpants Gnomes joke, but no underpants were taken. And thinking nothing about anything paranormal whatsoever. And I just see something in the corner of my eye in the bathroom. And I look up and I look directly at this little gray being that is walking in a very cartoon-like manner. About 3 steps is all I was able to see, sort of into past the radiator and then gone. It was probably 1.5 feet tall, shorter than the radiator. I don't want to make a connection between this being and Walter. I just find it funny that this being was dressed in a similar way. It was completely gray, but with different shades of gray so that I could see all the textures in its clothing. Little button up with suspenders and like overall type of outfit maybe. And I didn't notice anything about hair. There was no hat. There was no pointy hat. And again, not really a face or like just no face, just a blank space there. And it disappeared. And so there was like a millisecond delay where I was apprehending what that was. And then this is very uncharacteristic of me. You don't know me, but just trust me when I say this would not be how I would think I would react in this situation. I became enraged. I walked out. I ran out of the closet and I sat down on the edge of the bed and I like grabbed my knees and I said, "You get the F out of here," like really loud. And Oskar perked up when I yelled, but he didn't do anything. I think he was just laying on the bed, chilling, doing his Oskar things, which was probably taking an 8-hour nap. And so he may have not even been awake when this was happening, but I specifically remember he reacted not at all to this sense. I had that I got that static feeling all over me. It lingered. It wasn't a good feeling. Like when I had seen Walter and I felt like the whole world became brighter, and more colorful. This was like this was bad news. Bad news bears, not good. I shouldn't have seen it, or it shouldn't be here, or I shouldn't have seen it. And I felt like I was like shaking a little bit. And then I was like, you have to leave. You have to leave. I don't remember what I said, but it was something along those lines where I was just like, go, screaming expletives. And then I started to feel a little bit better. And I immediately connected it to the stories that my uncle had sent me. And I was just thinking, like, what is going on here? I'm just writing a book of ghost stories. This is not what I bargained for, I guess. Like, it's like the book is coming to life, right? But
plus, little gray man is in your space. It's not like your uncle is driving by and you're driving by. He's, his territory is nature, so he's allowed, right? in the Shire. But you don't want anything. Yeah.
He was like strolling, like he had somewhere to go, and it was this very cartoon, like sort of like almost mocking kind of. That's what's interesting for me. They're fascinating is how they appear in a way that is very cartoonish, that sort of looks like something I would have seen in a Disney movie. Do they do that on purpose to mess with us, or do they do it to make us less afraid? Because I've had experiences where I felt, or I've had people tell stories where they felt that something was trying to approach them in a way that would seem or feel familiar, but it was kind of lost in translation because they don't really know how to relate to us, and maybe they're trying or something, but then it's weirds you out even more. It's like even more psychedelic. So it's the hi-ho march, hi-ho.
It was,
hi-ho. I'm telling you.
But I do also wonder, is that just what people for millennia have seen? And that gets transferred.
That's just what they literally look like.
That's just what they do, and that's how they dress. And and maybe they change it up every 1,000 years, but from the Middle Ages,
periodically, I like to consult. From the book collection, I'm consulting the Chambers Dictionary of the Unexplained.
That's just his go-to.
Okay,
one of my favorites. Which I always think about, like Tobin's Spirit Guide. But it's funny. I got this down a few minutes ago when you were first talking about your Uncle Bernie, and I just opened it up. I was going to look up gnomes, and I could not find like specifically the word gnome in here or in my Mary Ellen Guiley Ghosts and Spirits book. I couldn't find gnomes, but when I first took this book down, you were talking about Bernie, and you said he considers himself a haunted person, and the page it opened up to randomly when I opened it said haunted people. Just that happened, but I didn't want to interrupt you while you were talking, and I was like, okay. But just now, it like literally that was the heading at the top of the page it opened up to. And then just now I was looking, okay, gnomes, little people. Yeah. And then so I got here this section on little people, one of the many euphemistic terms used to refer to fairies in order to avoid the bad luck caused by naming them directly. In folklore, it is considered very unlikely to refer to the fairy folk directly, since to use their name might summon them. Don't come around here. And then also some people believe that they do not like being referred to as fairies. Either way, it is thought to be safer not to use the word fairy. Of course, they put it in here 50,000 times. So
you're saying it.
When speaking of them, it's like the djinn. And instead, a wide range of euphemistic phrases, such as the little people or little folk, are employed. See also, and this is Celtic, Daoine Sidhe. I don't know how to, it's D-A, Forrest, maybe you know this, Daoine Sidhe.
It's probably going to be something like Dwajada.
Yeah. So I went over to that. And just to your point, Forrest, what you just said for that Irish or Daoine Sidhe or seed.
Here come that's right, Ed. Yes.
Here come the emails. Yeah.
Yes,
all right. So
from everyone from Southern Wales on
here,
to John O'Groats.
Let me just here. I'll pop it into Forvo. You think it's in there? Probably not, right?
No, but Scott, while you're thinking of that, doubling up, what's the other story that we
wait? Don't go forward yet. Okay, wait. Here it is. I'm listening to it in my head. Say it. Forvo's going to tell me what it is. Okay. Duini She.
Why wasn't that far off? Yeah.
In Irish folklores, the remains of the divine fairy race of Ireland, the Tuatha De Danann, who were forced to take refuge in the hills after the country was conquered by the Milesians and dwindled into the diminutive little people. Irish folklore tells of a once divine fairy race, the Tuatha De Danann, who were as tall as humans, if not taller. They lived in Ireland until the coming of the Gaelic Milesians, the fifth and last Celtic people to invade and settle in the country. And those who chose to remain in Ireland were forced to take refuge in the hills and mountains. Duini She, which, forgive my pronunciation, means literally people of the mounds. Mm-hmm. They developed the art of invisibility, and since that time cannot be seen by mortals unless they choose to show themselves, or the mortal either possesses second sight or smears a magical ointment on his or her eyes. The one exception is Midsummer Night, when ordinary people may catch a glimpse of them. As time went on, there's only one paragraph left here. As time went on, they dwindled in size and became a diminutive race, which caused them to be known by another name, the Duane Beaga, B-E-A-G-A, or little people. They are ruled by King Finbarra, or Finbarra, F-I-N-B-H-E-A-R-A, High King of the Irish Fairies, and his beautiful wife, Unach, who hold court beneath the fairy hill of Nachma. They enjoy the field sport of hurling and also chess. Many a mortal man has bet and lost all his possessions playing chess against Finbarra, who has never been beaten. They are merry but mischievous and sometimes cruel to humans, so they must be dealt with carefully. They also love to hunt, and when they ride abroad on their snow-white horses, only the tinkling sound of their harnesses betray their presence.
Ooh. That's interesting. I think that coincidentally, because we just did the Great Mull Air Mystery, I did look up. It's not entirely well. It is a theory that I did not post or posit during the show, but there are the legends of the pygmies of the Inner Hebrides in Scotland. The smaller people that are kind of mean, and you don't want to mess with them. And it's like, was that what? Peter ran into in his flight somehow? Is there something? Well, it's a very magical area anyway, and you do wonder though, as perhaps your experience. I was going to just say, Amelia, it's like you studying that. We've heard that before too, especially even our most level-headed friends we know that are very objective. Troy Taylor writing his book about the Exorcist case, having it also papers moved around. He comes back. It's like, I just laid down this chapter. I just printed out and then it'll be in between a stack of books where he would never put it.
Yeah. And one of the Halloween stories we picked about the jailer was a corrections officer. I don't know if you heard that, but he had gone up. He left the locked office to go to the bathroom or something. And he came back.
I saw the photo.
And they were stacked.
Up.
Yeah.
The woman who was the
somebody he worked with. That's right.
She came in, and it's one of those secure things behind plexiglass at a locked door, and it's one of those impossible things were a loose stack of paper. Like I said, it wasn't just taken out of the
they were like they
ream.
couldn't do it once they took it
These
down.
are-
They couldn't
these
get
are-
it back.
well,
that
no,
way.
wouldn't be able to. Yeah,
These papers have gone through the printer. They're all a little loosened up, and it's just in a stack. So things like to mess with you, and like you don't know why, if that's just a side effect of these things happening, or if it's a message, or just like you said, things with the wee folk where it's just like they like to mess with you a little bit. They like to make you come back, and it's like, well, wait a second, that shouldn't have happened, and just kind of like, we're here, but you're never going to see us. But the other thing that I was thinking of, well, first, Scott, you think about this while I ask, is that what other story did we come across that involved a Basenji? We recently looked that up, because I also like the fact that Oskar,
Andrea Perron's dog was a Basenji, wasn't it?
That's right. You're right.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, that had a reaction.
That's me nerding out on the Astonishing Legends.
Does Oskar bark?
He does. He does bark. He doesn't yodel. Unfortunately, his bark is quite shrill.
Yeah.
The other fan moment I was going to mention was the whole episode y'all did on the the elven people in that pilots were encountering. That there's this whole
the gremlins.
Yeah, gremlins. This whole realm of folklore that has to do with flight, human flight, and aviation, and also like sailing and the superstitions with that. And this is random, but even like Rammstein has a song in German about like elves on a plane.
That's great.
Yeah. So it's like these things.
I am sick of these. Yes.
Yeah.
Elves on this plane. They're everywhere. Like of the air, of the land, of, like you said, of the elements.
Yeah, man. Now that this opened up again, when I emailed y'all around Halloween and was thinking about this, and I was like, what hill do I want to die on? What my career is going to teeter on this moment of talking about gnomes. Do I really want to do this? And I was like, it was like on the brain. And then ever since then, it's kind of, it's just gotten bigger and bigger. And the plot thickens.
Yes.
Then there's even more to the story.
Let's continue.
But I didn't plug in my computer before I started the interview, so I need 30 seconds to grab my.
Sure,
that's fine.
It's quite all right.
Yeah.
But Scott,
those
there you go.
I saw this. I feel like that might be in.
Ed, who is that illustrator? Because that is a famous illustration there.
Oh yeah, because I saw that one too when I was searching the images. I can't remember who it is.
Oh, he's popping in. Ed's popping in.
I don't know. I just.
But I like the idea of summoning Ed. I mention his name and he appears.
Yes, he appears.
And he is kind of our genie, our personal djinn.
I can offer a series of wishes that won't come true.
Just the ones you don't want. Yes.
I don't know who, but I felt like we should have a visual aid for the 30 seconds.
No, I think, like I said, because it's very, it's the belt, it's the little tunic, the hat, it's all.
Well, this is the book Amelia was talking about.
Yeah.
This like weird biology of gnomes book from that. I don't know, but
yeah. See, I feel like is that by, because it feels so similar to this one. I wonder.
It's by a Dutch guy, I want to say, or like some.
Yeah.
There's
a Dutch illustrator.
Interesting. You can cut all this, but interesting. David the Gnome situation. I love David the Gnome, and it's a Spanish cartoon based on like a Nordic book or whatever, and the American show that I grew up on. Was like basically the dub was just do what you want. They just showed the footage to them and they were like, whatever story you think is the story.
Yeah.
But there's just go in here and live read what you think is happening.
Well, it's a great experiment. It came off well. And the idea is that, at least in the first episode, I think the very first one is that they do explain. The idea is that we're here, we're friendly, we have to share this earth. There's of course, a very much a component of like the Space Brothers.
The Gnomes knew you were talking about.
Hey, don't screw up this world. We all got to live here. You start dumping garbage bags in our, we might get upset. And so there is a real connection to the earth. But to Amelia's point about why her apartment near the radiator is, the most, again, there's a great interview that George Knapp did with, I was going to say from Skinwalker Ranch, Dr.
Travis?
Yeah, Dr. Travis Taylor. Yes,
that's Ed's favorite. Is that?
It is. No, it's terrific. But it's just basically it's all the stuff that you don't see in the show. That's what we're saying about doing a MH370 series or a Halloween special, is that you're constricted by format. And he said, like, there's a lot of weird stuff that they didn't show in the series, and not to get into that, but he talked about because this is part of it that is in the book Skinwalkers at the Pentagon, where they were seeing these phenomena. And we're talking about tough-minded lieutenants and military people who have seen a lot and don't put up with a lot of baloney, and will go home, or they'll call their they'll be at Skinwalker Ranch and they call their family at home. It's just like, yeah, honey, there was
stuff's
a
happening
shadowy thing peeking out behind a tree, or we saw this giant, like a shadow of a wolf man type thing run behind the bushes. Yeah. And this is not while they, it didn't follow them home. It's happening
simultaneously while they're on the ranch. It's happening on the East Coast, and on top of that, also happening to their children's friends.
Yeah,
they're
people on the street. Stuff. They're seeing weird stuff.
And they didn't even know where their friend's dad was at that time.
No, so you wonder though, what are those connections? And so George Knapp asks Dr. Taylor, it's like, well, what do you think is happening? He's like, well, it's quantum entanglement. That's probably the best that science is going to do. Coming from an astrophysicist, is that there is some kind of pinpoint connection that is opening up these channels. And maybe just like you said, that maybe that part of that folklore is true. You start studying them, you start saying their name.
They also called it a contagion.
Yeah, it's like a viral thing. Yeah, it's a viral thing.
But it doesn't require contact. It requires like psychic contact in a way.
There is something there. So it's like I said, just reading the stories. And that, I know people, you don't have to be afraid. I think it's very rare that it happens. Certainly all the letters and emails we've gotten, it's a very rare thing. That's why we're so excited to hear yours and your uncle's story, because it's rarely is it that it goes on for that long or described in such detail. But people would say like, well, that, years ago we had one where a girl and her boyfriend saw something in their apartment, and it was the same kind of thing. This little thing that ducked behind the coffee table. And they both, it's like, did you see that? Like, yeah. And what she said, well, the only thing is that we're both Native and we believe that these things are possible. Maybe that has something to do with it. But if this is too personal, certainly you're not obligated to tell us, but did something happen with a significant other where they also saw something like this?
Yes. So the plot thickens, right? After all this stuff is going on, and I mentioned it to the person I was dating at the time. When I say dating, I was in a very toxic relationship with somebody that went on for years, not really because I wanted it to go on, but because getting out of it took that long. People out there will definitely know what I mean, especially young people who end up moving in with somebody out of like financial, dependency, and then you get yourself into a mess. So I was in a mess with this person, but there was a remarkable thing about him was he was from Mexico City, and I told him about this thing that happened to me and my uncle's stories, and he knew I was writing a book. And he was like, that's the darndest thing. Like, when I was a kid, his grandmother had grown up in the countryside, not in the city. He was like from the city proper. She had grown up more out in the country. And she was like, when she was growing up, they were surrounded by the little folk in the hills, right? I think he used the word duendes.
Yeah.
And she would tease him a little bit and say that she would see one around him sometimes, that he had one with him, but that he shouldn't be scared because it was good luck. And of course, when she was telling him this, probably when he was being bad as a kid, he was like 6 or 8 years old, and, oh, don't worry. Oh yeah, you've got this little duende that's following you around. I can see it, but oh, don't be scared. And then of course he was scared and probably scared into like not behaving badly or whatever it was. But he was like, oh yeah, my grandmother told me about this. And then I thought to myself, like, let me make sure I'm not missing a detail either. But I was just like, how bizarre. And so then I started to think that it's like, what are the chances that I'm uncovering these stories from my uncle, and then my boyfriend is telling me about his, we're just casual, everybody's just casually all of a sudden exchanging these like elf and sprite stories. And again, you know, just to reiterate too, like I came to all this through the mainstream ghost hunting community, and the mainstream ghost hunting community was at the time in 2011, 12, 13, and remains now. There's some big shifts going on that I'm really excited to see, but like very more narrow-minded than I think people want to believe, you know, people, the debunking and everything, which I do believe, obviously it has its place. It had its place on television too. And a lot of ghost hunters would think they don't base their ghost hunting on television when they really do, and not thinking outside of a very constrictive sort of prescribed method of doing things a certain way that has its place. It's an entry point. I was a debunker. I was like a chronic debunker, even though stuff like this was happening to me. And I was the kind of person who would skeptical until proven otherwise. And I used to say that a lot, and I don't say that anymore because I don't want to be skeptical. I want to believe in the woo-woo. I don't believe ghost hunting is science. It's not science and it's not religion either, but there's a little bit of everything. It's like a little bit of everything in between. And so anyway, these stories just also weren't part of my experience at the time, even though I was into like ghostly stuff. We have to fast forward from this point a little bit, because I moved out of that apartment, which was in Edgewater. For people who are curious as to where that was, I didn't have any other strange experiences there, really. It was in Edgewater near Foster and Sheridan for my fellow Chicagoans. And then I moved to Albany Park, which is a really cool neighborhood. But I lived near Kedzie and Lawrence and above an abandoned restaurant in an apartment that had been completely rehabbed. But it was cheap. We were poor. It wasn't a good situation. It's hard for me to reconcile the fact that I love myself, but I let myself get into something that was this bad. But he was an alcoholic and an addict, and some of the people I've loved the most in the world have been alcoholics, in recovery and otherwise. So it's not that he was just not a very good person. And so framing around that, my life in some way sort of continued as not as normal, but like I was still like I was growing in my career. I was still writing. I was doing my thing and hiding this very ugly home life that I had. And it was kind of this weird, you know, classic, like when we finally broke up in like 2013-ish. Yeah, 2013. Everybody came out of the woodwork with their story about what a creep he was. I was like, why? Why now? Why now? You know, please. I really wish somebody would have told me earlier. My best friend had a divorce from her husband. The first time I met him, he was weird. And I never told her these things just to be a dick to her. I probably can't say that word, but like,
you can. On the junk drawer, there's no rules.
Okay. I informed her from the beginning as a caring person that I had grievances with this man. Yeah. And if she would have decided to stay with him forever and ever, at least I had aired them, but I didn't, you know, and I was as diplomatic about it as possible. So when I had that situation, I was like, at least one of you could have just said something at the time. But there were a million red flags raining from the sky that I saw them with my own eyes, and I just went about my life. So this is part of the story in that there was an escalating tension in this apartment.
Were you on Lawrence or Kedzie? Can we take a look at the, do you think you could see it from Street View, like where you were?
Oh yeah. So I lived above the Chicas. So if you keep keep turning.
Oh, I saw Chico's. Yeah, keep going around there.
Yeah, keep turning. It was
you lived above a store?
Lawrence. So that's Lawrence. Okay, so Lawrence and Kedzie. That's exactly what I said. Okay, so yeah. Oh, first of all, that little grocery, La
Michoacan.
That's the best grocer in Chicago. So if you keep turning again, I know where we are now.
Okay.
Keep turning. Back on Lawrence and then go forward just a tidbit. And the Chica's should be on this corner where this white building is on the left-hand side.
Okay.
By the Family Dollar.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
What is it, quickly, what is it like living above a store?
Well, it was not, it was quiet. It wasn't that loud.
Yeah.
In a way, I enjoyed it. So I had, this was the gritty city life that I came to experience because I was living, in this kind of, it was an experience. It was an experience that you have in your mid-20s. Not now. Not as a married woman who's almost 40. Jonathan
I did
and I have
in New
a very
York.
different lifestyle now than I was willing to entertain before.
That's a cool building.
But I shopped there a lot. I mean, certainly But the building was super cool building. The neighbor was a meth addict, and I'm not being sarcastic. The neighbor was a meth addict. She had cockroaches in her apartment that came into my apartment and infiltrated my life. I had bed bugs while I lived there.
Oh my
bed bugs is a whole other, there should be a podcast just about bed bugs. There probably is, but, she stabbed her boyfriend once, like a dozen times. And it was, just the energy there was not great. It was not a happy, fun, family, lighthearted sort of place where you get your life together and make good decisions. And certainly not inside of the apartment that I was living at either. And there was just this escalating tension. It's so cool that we're like looking at it right now. This just escalating feeling of dread. And some of it was paranormal. Oh, yeah. So if you turn here, so that's the entrance, was not by Chica's. It's a little bit further down the way in the building, like right where that parking sign is. Yeah. So see where it says space available? It was abandoned when I lived there in 2012 and 13. And it did not look like that. It was as if the fire or whatever had just happened and it was all still just like a ruin. So that's where... the corner, so not where the flag is, but on that corner there, the second floor corner, that would have been my apartment.
Right up there.
You got it. Yeah. That's crazy. So a couple of things would happen there that was my bedroom window and the bathroom window on the right, bedroom window on the left.
On the second floor, right?
Yeah, on the second floor. And so some strange things did happen there. I would hear a knock on the door. Several, you know what? That no tirar basura.
Yeah.
He spray painted that.
You did.
No, he did.
He did.
The person in question, he spray painted that because the building got bed bugs from a mattress that had been leaned up against the building outside. On the outside, and the bed bugs came in through the bathroom window. So that's a whole other, that's another 2 hours of story time. But
yes, and a Beatles B-side.
So one way to solve a problem, of ugly trash is to spray paint the entire side of a building.
Right.
So these are the decisions that we're making.
Right.
And that was our porch up there in that second floor, little patio, grill and barbecue out there and breathe in all kinds of dust. It's really cleaned up now. It's cleaned up, even though it's still an alley. It was not clean up at the time.
Yeah.
I don't want to say every night, but many nights in a week, there would be 3 knocks at the door at 8:00. The first few times it happened, I was like, that's weird. Isn't that uncanny? Doesn't that seem like something out of a movie? And then I actually had a friend over. My friend Marsha Mack, who was a fellow paranormal enthusiast, was over one night. And we were just shooting the breeze. And there was a knock on the door, dun, 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 at like 8:00. And I was like, I'm telling you, that's it. That's what I'm talking about. It sounds like a person knocking, right? I'm not crazy. and we went to the door, which is what I would usually do casually, not thinking like, oh, I'm going to catch this ghost in action or whatever, but just being like, is there actually somebody at the door? Because our meth addict friend would sometimes knock on the door. And nobody was ever there. And the hallway was such that in the time it took me to get to the door to peek through the hole, there was nowhere for anybody to go, where if it was a person,
you would have seen him.
Yeah. I've had sleep paralysis at times throughout my life, for sure. I had unprecedented sleep paralysis and night terrors at this apartment. One of them included me experiencing as myself, not outside myself or in a dream world, but as myself in bed in that situation, hearing my own voice calling to me from the kitchen. And I was awake, Amelia, even if I was still in a dream state. And I didn't see it, but I could see it in my mind. And I knew as if there was a shadow. I don't remember if there was a shadow, but it was as if this shadow was coming down the hallway, of a gnome figure standing in the hallway, calling to me in my own voice. Hearing my own voice calling to me was one of the scariest things that's ever happened to me. I could have been dreaming, and it could be nothing. It could have been symbolic of the anxiety that I was having at the time. But it was one of the wildest things I've ever heard, was my own voice sort of again with the mockery bit. And then things did come to a head with this person. The violence escalated, the physical and just the trashing of things type of violence escalated. Really just bizarre stuff. And even with that, none of these things weren't paranormal. Like, trashing the apartment wasn't paranormal, but it was another thing where I would just shrug my shoulders and start cleaning. It wasn't, I didn't call the police. I didn't call I did not tell my friends. I did not tell my parents. I did not talk to a counselor. I just cleaned up the mess and kept on chugging. Right. So, but anyway, things came to a head, and I left 2 weeks short of re-signing the lease, which is how you can tell I was in such a rotten headspace that the only way I was going to be able to leave without being homeless was if my friend Erica took me in, and she agreed. And I mean, it was a whirlwind. She said, if you need to stay with somebody, I did confide a few things in her. You can come stay with me. And I was like, how about Wednesday? And I ended up moving in with her and living with her for like 2 or 3 years. And we had a wonderful, that was a time of healing.
Right.
For both of us, because we had both been deep down in it. And then I met Jonathan, who just blows everybody out of the water. And it's like none of that is even real prior to that, So, sort of proud of myself that I left that behind. But anyway, if I hadn't moved in with her and I wasn't going to be homeless then, or unhoused or whatever, then I would have had to stay there with him. And I went. My gut was like, you're done, Amelia, you're done. So I was still in contact with him because he was non-functional. He was non-functional, and there was nobody in the world who was going to help him get himself together and move out except for me. So I was still in contact with him. I was still helping him gather his things. I was helping him move and deciding where he could go and coordinating things with his friend. And in the couple of weeks that he lived in that apartment before he dipped out and we, abandoned the whole thing, he was telling me that he heard little feet running back and forth on the hardwood floor every night. And that he thought we could hear Oscar's little pitter patter of his little paws. He thought it was Oskar, but then when so Oskar was with me. So first of all,
right.
Oskar wasn't there. So he was sort of in this sleep state. I believe, now that I'm thinking about it, that he had heard this once before when I wasn't home, but he was home and Oskar was with him in the bed. So he was awakened to these footsteps and thought Oskar was running up and down the hallway, but Oskar was there next to him sleeping. But in any case, Oskar was with me in my new place. And So he was like, yeah, but he didn't say like, I heard Oskar running around. It was really weird. He said, little feet, like the running of small feet, almost like a scuttling. So
interesting.
I started to rebuild my life after that. I did have other paranormal encounters in Erica's apartment. She had paranormal encounters in her apartment, and she's not a ghosty person at all. So she was super like geeked out on like, Amelia, like, what are your impressions? But my life just changed completely. And the gnome stuff at that time was over. It went away. So that was that. That was kind of like the story closed with that, and it was just so bizarre.
Can we see Oskar?
Yeah.
I can hear he's right there.
He's waiting.
He's
for
my hero.
Yeah, he's ready for his close up. I think.
Yeah, he's ready. He needs to pee, and here I am. So
okay. Well, don't pick him up too forcefully then.
Right. So this is
now it won't let me solo.
He's
Oskar, there we go. Yeah.
The companion I've had longer than anybody else in my life.
Look at that sweet face.
Other than Jonathan. So Oscar's been my roommate since 2008.
Goodness, you're killing me.
He's a really good boy. His breath smells so much like doggy butt.
Yeah.
He's a really good boy.
He's never, in all that though, he's never reacted to, well, certainly the one time, well, you don't know because you weren't home when the papers were fussed, but also the thing running by the bathroom, he was probably napping or something. He just, like I said, if it was a small creature, I mean, this is, people think it depends on the dog, but like, Scott's dog, when I was house sitting, you could be in the living room and there's something in the backyard. It's like, how did you hear that? And she would just, little Lou would just bolt down the hallway and go right to the window.
I mean, it's interesting you say that because like he can tell when Jonathan's getting on the elevator downstairs, he starts to get excited. So my feeling is we took him to the Old Baraboo Inn. We did an overnight Scooby-Doo investigation and we brought him along and he got on the couch and went to sleep and was like, whatever. I hate you guys. I want to go back to the hotel.
Right.
And so my take is that either he's completely oblivious and just is not that kind of dog, or maybe he sees stuff all the time and it's just
doesn't
totally,
care. Yeah, it's like big deal.
Right.
Yeah.
He's seeing all the stuff that I don't see because apparently I'm surrounded by interesting things going on. So he's just like, oh, this is just Tuesday around here. I don't know.
Or option 3 is mine, and it's more traditional folklorish, is that the little folk have a way with animals and a spell they can kind of cast because they're small, diminutive, and they don't want to get ripped apart by any kind of Basenji or a rat terrier or terriers. Yeah. Any kind of thing that goes after.
Terriers, right. They like to dig and
Yeah. So it's maybe there's something to that if you believe it, but, and there's certainly, like I said, you get your close friends or just friends in a circle and you tell these stories and they think you're joking and they start laughing. And you go to Iceland and they're like, yeah, this is tell us something new.
We don't build on that road. Like,
they just take it more seriously. But speaking of, we would be remiss for not mentioning this. Speaking of Mexico City, recently, President Lopez Obrador, President Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador.
There we go.
Said or claims that he found a photo of an aluxe, and I think it's Lualuxe. So I'm not sure if the X is silent for aluxe, but I would think it is probably silent like an H. So aluxe, which is a mischievous woodland spirit in Mayan folklore. So
so he tweeted that.
One thing I love about this comparison photo is that even in this like ancient Mayan architecture, this little sprightly creature still has that look. Yeah. It's got the look.
Well, the in the carving there, exactly, with the hair, the kind of the crazy hair and the
hat.
There's a mischievous,
something a
impish,
little,
very impish.
Yeah,
and then there's the thing in the tree,
insulting way, but like
okay. So the here we did a little work on the thing in the tree. I'll ask the mechanic if he can find the article that I asked to translate to ask Google Translate to turn to English, because this one. All right, this one here. It's so that image is 2 years old, according to one of the Twitter commenters said, no, this is from 2 years ago. Not that I think anybody thought that the president took the photo.
No, he never stated that. It was right. So as he says, an engineer working on the road. But here's, like I said,
scroll down a little bit. So let's see. Captured by a man named Juan in a tree in a park located in Citrocotores neighborhood in the aforementioned royal municipality. After capturing the supposed witch, Juan did not, this is bad translation, by the way, Juan did not hesitate to publish the incredible image, and netizens wrote different comments, most of them mocking and even made memes. The image shows a silhouette with a slim complexion, a kind of turban on his head, and stares at the camera.
What was funny is that we see this all the time, is that people are so certain. Well, look,
is there two shots there? Sorry.
Yeah, there's right. There's a second shot. First of all, I'm not sure. Like I said, if somebody says it's 2 years old, it could very well be. If they find the same thing, a lot of times people will just say that and not have any proof. It's not worth digging.
No, but this article is 2 years old. This one here. We know it's at least that old, but we don't know if it was older or newer after that. Right.
So what I was going to say, though, is that it's just funny that people, there was one Twitter commenter and just said, it's a raccoon with a bag on its head.
I saw that comment.
Okay, I guess, they could have they get into stuff. They certainly, there's a reason they're called trash pandas. They get into stuff. How likely that is that, first of all, it doesn't look like, I've seen plenty, I got raccoons probably right now in my yard. Is that it? I don't know what it is, but it's not that. So you do wonder, though.
Those are good ones there.
Yeah. So those are pretty good, but like you do wonder, it's like it may not be an aluhe, but it's something, and I don't think it doesn't seem natural, or it's just. I mean, it could be an animal at a weird angle, but. That's certainly part of, like I said, we've just recently we've been in the territory here of the Mayans and the Nazcans.
Yeah.
And
with the duendes, I've heard people say Alush, and I never knew what that meant. I think that is, be. Or if that's what these are also.
It could be more, because it is
ALUX. That would make sense.
It was incredible to me that like this article popped up this week when I knew I was going to be talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
And it came across my Google, like on my phone. Like if Google will read my thoughts if I talk about something, or if I, or stuff that's related to my searches, but I hadn't done anything with this at the time. And it just like popped up, and I was
and then it blew up.
The chances?
It blew up on the internet, and we were scheduling this originally. We were going to record. What were we going to do? We were going to do Monday. Was that right? I can't remember.
Yeah.
That was like the day it came out. And then I had to delay because of some family stuff. And so it was actually even more aligned.
It was, And I did want to mention the thing that I remember as my all-time, this I didn't mention at the beginning is funny, but like we were laughing about this earlier, the classic YouTube video of the gnome-like creature scuttling across the frame. And I remember seeing that back in like the early days of YouTube when I first had I came late to the party, but like when I first had like a computer, I was in college or whatever. And my mind was like so blown away by this video. And now of course it circulates as like as a joke, but it's funny, and it's funny in that sort of like off kilter, like twisted sort of what am I seeing kind of way. But I'd always, it fascinated me, and just the ways it just, South American, Central American, and European like gnome folklore are very, have these like the way that they look is similar, Duendes originated in Spain. That's what I learned just this past week doing the research. So they, it was lore that came over with the Spanish too. And it's like, really then it becomes so much more than these gnome stories. Now I'm like, it's open. Now it's like, wow, there's just so much more to this. I was listening to Our Strange Skies, and they were doing a whole story. There we go, my little friend there. Stories about people's UFO encounters that involved like these small strange beings, and they were laughing about how they were dressed like, you know, Peter Pan. I'm like, well, I have a story about that. So,
like, I always think about if someone's hoaxing that, like, if that was a person doing a hoax, or and we've talked about this with Bigfoot and whatever. It's like in a lot of these places where if you take that chance, there's a chance you're going to get shot by someone.
Depending on where you are.
Depending on where you are in a lot of parts of the country.
Well,
you're going to get shot. Like you run around in the woods. Like when those people were doing all those dressing up as clowns everywhere.
Well, somebody did get chased. No, somebody did get, somebody was faking that. And that's a little different because it's not a 1 foot tall clown.
No, with that, but I'm just saying, anytime you dress up as something scary and you scare the wrong person, you run the risk of being injured.
Yeah, and that doesn't stop people from doing it, certainly, because people do all kinds of dumb things, not thinking about the consequences. But you do wonder about it. But I want to make a point, because we've seen this quite a bit, and certainly, anthropologists and folklorists. Is nothing new to them, but we see a blending. So you have, you have the indigenous cultures of an area, as with the, like I said, the Nazcans, and then the peoples before them that are pre-Hispanic, and then you have the Spanish, and it becomes blended, and then you have something kind of new between the two. Same thing that we saw with L'Anneau Rouge. Where you have old French traditions and their customs blending with the native tribes in the area, and then that becomes something new. And that is just the way of history. It's so people that it's kind of nice in a way, and like it's just a mishmash, and there's no truth getting to whatever is the truth or the original thing, or it belongs to these people or not. It's just there. And we're the ones assigning all these things to it. We're the ones saying that this is ridiculous, or these people are silly, or it can't be this, or it can't be that. It's just there. It's just like
assigning names, assigning religious, meaning, spiritual meaning, or whatever meaning to certain things that are these are bits and pieces of activity, or these are things people experience, see, hear, feel, 6 senses, and we organize it through mythology and religion and folklore. But like you said, it's like they're there. We could get, they're doing what they do.
This was on Reddit today on the, I don't know. I probably scrolled down a couple of pages. But this is according to the post, and I didn't look at the comments to see it, to vet it or whatever. This is a person who stood in a blizzard for 4 hours in a Scream costume and stared at a webcam.
Oh my goodness.
Just standing there 4 hours.
Just for a gag.
Huh.
I guess.
Like a social experiment? Like
who knows? They made it onto Reddit, so maybe, I mean.
Well, there you go. And what people will do for gold, for Reddit gold.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever. But it's just, like I said, depending where it is, you're going to get a smart aleck that's going to walk up to and just clock that guy. Just to, we've seen it.
Terrified. Yeah.
We've seen the thing where as different people react, it's the, and again, they're trying to get on and get likes on YouTube or now TikTok, is the guy who pops out of the Halloween basket, or he's dressed like the scarecrow on the porch. And those guys get punched. Yeah. Cause your first reaction is to beat down on that. But I think when it's real, sometimes that can happen. Certainly when we covered the Halloween story, our friend up in Canada and up on the ranch in Alberta, is that if it's so horrific and you're armed, it is to try to put this thing down. And so he shot at it.
I know exactly where, Forrest, you and I have stood right at this intersection.
Oh, is that that is
right across the street from the Monte Vista Hotel that we stayed at. Oh,
well, there you see. So the Monte Vista is a tie-in because
there's the train station,
notoriously haunted hotel.
Yeah. That's great. That's right across from the hotel that I had the exploding head syndrome thing in, and saw the train on the street out the window in the middle of the night.
Okay, and this is also, Scott, where you stood for 4 hours in a Scream outfit.
Yeah, you know what? Weirdly, that was me. Yeah.
Solved.
Yeah.
In the middle of the night. But
sorry, that's weird. I didn't realize it was Flagstaff. Yeah.
Yeah, here's the thing: is that it's it's a real person, and
also the new Scream movie's coming out. It could be it could be marketing.
Well, there you go. That's what they were doing with remember the Smile, because that's the new trend. They think it's clever. Is like with the movie Smile, is that they had people get onto in the back of shot. So like in a soccer game, they paid somebody for, at least the 90 minutes of the game, and then probably for another hour to just sit there and creepily smile into the, getting on camera as a viral marketing campaign. So, but it's like I said, you can pull that stuff for a while, but it's kind of like, remember when Dave Letterman would have Rupert, the Hello Deli shop owner, go and just kind of mess with people. And one guy finally was like, "I'm about to stab you." And it's like, yeah, you're in Manhattan. You're going to press the wrong button and somebody is going to react, and that's what's going to happen. But, but I don't feel bad for the wee folk, because there's something, again, they do feel like they have to run off, or they just vanished. We've certainly, we've heard stories from people where it's like, they'll, it's kind of the reverse of the duck around, is that they go around a corner and then they're just gone. The knock is that's a very common thing. I've have a friend who's described that happening at certain times. But what I would like to know with that, and it's just kind of that weird geeky thing, is it exactly at 8 p.m.? Sometimes are they late? Right. It's 8:04.
Yeah, and then when you bring the religion into it, the three knocks, it's the Trinity, all that stuff. And
I try to stay away from like the labeling of that kind of stuff, especially. I'm sure that Jesus and his pals have like bigger business to take care of than, I just, I don't know. That's where like the memory part kind of comes in. Like, I remember that it was around 8 p.m. I didn't ever look. I mean, I'm sure I think I glanced at the clock at the time, but at the time I wasn't keeping a record. I wasn't keeping a journal. It was more anecdotal. It was like every night when the clock strikes 8, and it might have only happened 5 or 6 times, but it happened 5 or 6 times, and it felt like all the time. And I remember hearing it, and then the person would go to the door and be like, "Do you hear somebody knock?" And I would think to myself, I did. I hear this knocking all the time. But, and I also wanted to mention to something you had said earlier, that like when you watch some of those reality shows, like the fear shows where they put people in those like practical joke situations where something paranormal is staged happening, a lot of times they stand there kind of flabbergasted or dumbfounded, or they like just sort of keep doing whatever they're doing. Right. It's like those magic shows, like we're going to keep unpacking these boxes, and then something bizarre is unfolding, and they just sort of like, they look, and then but they're still doing what they're doing. And I think that sort of speaks to that sort of, that's like our brain. I don't know if it's like a protective thing that we're like, just keep calm, unless the times when people are like throwing punches is when somebody's jumping out from behind something.
Yeah, that's primal. Right.
Like, so I wonder if that's like our lizard brains are like, we're not paying attention to that because it's not hurting us yet. And, and it's go time. But
generally, I mean, I rarely do. It's kind of, I mean, it's a silly thought, but I don't think we've ever come across a story or an anecdote where somebody, was surprised by a shadow person and then they just tried to punch it. It's like there's people, they have different reactions, but usually, like I said, I think when it's genuine is that it more of fear and not to, I'm going to fight this thing. I'm going to get the heck out of here.
There's something, my uncle had another story about hearing something come into his house. And my uncle, as you could gather, as a hunter, and he's decked out, he's guns head to toe. Right. And, he had said something in the story along the lines of like hearing these footsteps come down the hallway, and he had a pistol like in his bedside table. And he says in the story, he's like, I knew that my pistol was of no use to me at this moment. And that this was completely, whatever battle he was about to fight was going to be totally like cerebral.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Right. That's it. That's it. That sounds like an interesting guy.
I know you should have him on, but he's not.
I would love to have him on.
Technology, so he doesn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bernie is a legend. Well, Amelia, as we start to close out here, what are you working on now? What would you?
I think what he's saying is, as we start to wrap things up, if you want to talk, There you go. He came right in. It was perfect. You froze up, Forrest. I was filling in for you. You froze up, but you came back on. What are you working on now? So we're
That's
good.
odd. Okay.
And you're frozen again. There you are.
Yeah. So, gosh, I got to refer to my notes because my brain it's been a long day. I don't know anymore. Right now I'm in a little bit of a holding pattern because I published a book last year and the year before that. And I'm just resting on my laurels or whatever, I guess, for a little bit right now. But I do have some book projects in mind, including another poetry book that's
cool.
Maybe not related to the paranormal, although the other poetry book, Apparitions, has supernatural elements in it. It's not about ghosts per se.
Right.
But, and I'm eager to start a new project, maybe with a Chicago theme, or work on some of these ghost stories that I'm starting to be more talkative about now. Maybe I should get these down on paper also. I will be at the Haunted America conference with Troy Taylor in June. Yeah. And I'm really excited about that. I'm so thrilled to be going down there. And I have other events people can, I love to hear from people and connect with people. So I'm all over the interweb. I'm not on TikTok. That's everything else. Yes. Keeping up with my events there. My husband, Jonathan, and I, we have our own little micro business called Amelia's Dragon Goddess Boutique. So, you can get my books on Amazon and all the usual places, but I have a little online store where we also sell handmade perfumes, solid perfumes and incenses and other magical items. He's more of like a magical practitioner. Thank you. The mechanic is great.
He's on it. He's very mechanical.
Tap the screen, but we'll have links. We'll have links in the posting. Yes.
Cool. I appreciate it. So, that's our get rich slow scheme, as we call it. That's just for fun. That's just for us to enjoy. He loves making the stuff with his hands and everything, doing that's cool. all handmade, handcrafted stuff. And so I'm looking forward to writing another book and just enjoying writing for a while before I start thinking about publishing again. But yeah, this last year was really banner for me. This is shaping up to be a banner year too. So I'm really grateful that you had me on, and I hope to continue this cool new friendship that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
thank you for coming on.
Yeah. In part of the circle here with not so newfound friends, but we've had Allison Jorlin on for our Christmas special.
Oh, yes.
And then that's the connector between all three of us. Yeah. And who also, we were just DMing back and forth, and I said, I think she's going to come on and talk about a gnome. She's like, she has to tell me those stories.
Yeah, because she's very interested. Allison's the coolest. Yeah.
Yeah. And Troy's been on a couple times too.
Oh, so, I know. Oh my God, I fangirled myself into oblivion every time. I'm just, wow, all my favorite people in one place.
He is so generous with his content. Whenever we stumble across, 9 times out of 10, he's already written a book on it. So it's like we'll just call and be like, "Hey, can we reference?" He's like, "Do whatever you want." He's so great about that.
Yeah. He's cool.
Well, he does an excellent job at framing the narrative. So we'll try and do some little research to fill in bits of here, but he's framed it all for us. So it's like, hey, can we just use the story structure, because he's very good at that, taking some historical happening and turning it into a story. But we hope to see you around a lot more as part of our collective here, and don't be a stranger if anything weird happens. But I think my summation is that it was a tumultuous, turbulent time, and unlike your uncle, maybe in a way that where, like you said, I don't know exactly if it's a haunted life, but he was open to it. His filters were down, and these things are happening. I think maybe with you or whatever, that's also a common thing where there's some tumult, and it makes these things more common. And now we're so glad that you're in a more settled, happier place, that that kind of those kind of monkey shines are maybe over for a while.
Right. Yeah. I continue to have the comings and goings of experiences after I go to a haunted place. Little things will happen around the apartment. They're usually benign or friendly or sort of what we were talking about, where it's like I'm open to experiencing them, but to a degree, because I don't want to live in a haunted house. Do not scare me. Do not appear over me. When I'm waking up, just little sounds or things in the apartment. Totally fine. I'm curious after this interview if something will happen.
Yeah,
I'll let you know.
I said the word fairy 50,000 times.
You did. As you were reading that, you shouldn't say the word.
Him. Yeah.
And I wonder. Yeah. So I do believe that that these experiences were meaningful. That these beings were here at a very specific time. I don't know what meaning I think I will learn, it might not even be until after this chat that I really start to piece those things together, since it did all happen in that very packed, that was like an action packed time in life. But again, I also believe that they're natural, and it's not that deep maybe for them as it is for us. We are always looking for those signs, and the signs from them, and maybe they're just doing what they do. But I'd like to think that my little friend there was maybe warning me, but I don't know. So I don't even want to say. But
well, without having to read into it at face value, it sparked some creativity and was inspiration for some writing, I think, perhaps, and that. Whether, even if it didn't happen, and even if you hallucinated the whole thing, let's say, there's something about it that is, it's kind of a kicker to that creative process and the imagination, at least.
Well, that brings up a good point, because I believe that about the Walter experiences too. That prompted me to write a whole book about this ghost, and then it prompted this career, and then it prompted all these wonderful relationships that I have with people from all over the place. And so, it could be even more abstract than what I'm thinking. And because I don't have fond feelings about this person, but they needed a lot of love and care at that time that the humans in their life could not give them, because he was just not in a good place. And so maybe they were there for him in that way, and in some way as well.
Well, I think that wraps it up. I want to see if you'll come back maybe in the future and join us, especially if we do a roundtable on the main show. And also, we're going to be trying to trend towards a little more video content here in the future. So
for sure, if
you'd be willing to. And by the way, I think you could have absolutely done this live. You would have been fine.
Thanks. No, totally. I just, if I have the preference, I won't go live, but I would do okay live too. I hear
you. Well, here's the thing is that, like I said, our Patreon audience to begin with, which is where this is going to premiere, terrific folks, just wonderful. I mean, we're all like friends here, but they would be asking some questions. And and again, I wouldn't be afraid of anything that they would posit, because it's certainly not the usual YouTube comment section, which which you're just putting out to the world. But you'd be surprised how many people have had similar things, but no one's asked them. And even if they did, they're reluctant to talk about it. But I think as the years, especially I think in the next couple of years, this one included, and in the next 2 or 3, we're going to see a huge loosening up of tongues and experiences and people coming forward, because at some point, like I said, Scott and I have always said this, at some point with a lot of stuff happening you don't know what it is, you can't define it, but you can't deny it's happening. You start to look foolish if you keep denying it. It's like, there's nothing here, nothing's happening. Then you start to look like, are you not seeing what's happening in front of your own eyes?
How much do you really need before you start to,
And that's but it's all, on the other hand, it's all extremely personal. So we've always said that every experience is,
And that's my kumbaya thing, is like creating space for people to be comfortable to share their stories. Because there's so many ghost hunters aren't kind to each other. Skeptics aren't kind to ghost hunters. So people have these stories and they're looking to share them. So if they had a safe place to do that.
Well, that's what we hope to do around here.
This show, like Astonishing Legends and Our Strange Skies. Penny Royal podcast is really good too. But there's there's a lot of people I think that are like changing.
I heard of it.
There's like a shift.
Yeah. All right.
Ryan Sprague's Somewhere in the Skies features also a lot of a lot of listener interaction and stories, and so that's another great outlet too. But yeah, we're just a big community of para nerds, and so but here's the thing: it's a lot more interesting than just kind of like shoving all this under the carpet. So to me anyway. But anyway, well thanks again.
Yes, thanks again. Please hang out. We'll talk to you backstage after the show. Mechanic, thank you for all your help. If you'll roll the closing credits, please.